Welcome to the Para Media Podcast with Mukundaravi.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Mara Media live podcast today. We have joining us today Shawn, Binda from the Hindu Lifestyle podcast. Let's see if we're up yet. Are we up? Let's go. Looks like we're having some technical issues for a sec. So there we go. All right. Hey, Shawn, how are you?
I am doing okay for a Monday evening.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You had a good weekend? Did you guys do anything fun with the family?
So this was the first weekend that I've been home, actually, because every weekend from about June, I've either had a wedding, function at the Mandir, traveling. I've been on two mini vacations. I've had some speaking engagements. So this past weekend was the first weekend where we didn't have anything. I have one more wedding left, which is this coming long weekend, and that's it. Summer's done. It's been hectic, but it's been good, man. It's been good.
Yeah. Can you tell us, man? Tell me about your this Hindu lifestyle podcast. You started that years ago, and you took a little bit of a hiatus. And just tell me how you got into it and what made you want to start that. And
yeah, so I mean, I guess if you want to start my whole life story, but let me just start with sort of Hindu lifestyle for now. So my entry into Hinduism certainly was from attending Mandir on a regular basis. We can go into my history if you want. My father was the founding president of the Devi Mandir, which is a Mandir located here in about 45 minutes east of the city of Toronto, the Devi Mandir. So he was the founding president.
Sure.
And there's a whole history about that. But growing up, we attended that Mandir. It started off as a farmhouse. It was a small house on 2.5 acres. And then there was the building and the construction of it. So my entry into Hinduism was from that perspective. I grew up playing tabla. So my sister is a Hindustani classical singer. I played tabla. And that was me growing up. But as I got older, I started getting more involved in the management of the Mandir. And there came a time in 2012 where they needed an instructor for what we call our Bal Vikas classes. So these are the classes that we have for younger kids, all the way up to teenagers, those going into universities. And there was a need for an instructor. And I was actually one of the directors of the Devi Mandir, and my portfolio was looking after all of this programming. And because we couldn't find a teacher, I said, let me step in. And prior to that, I was involved in a lot of Hindu youth conferences. So it gave me an opportunity to start giving back and teaching. And that really set me off on another sort of track in my life. And it was through those classes that when I was teaching, that the students at the time, they were about 13, 14, 15, 16. And they were the ones who were encouraging me back in 2016, 2017, saying, you should do more with these lessons. And at the time, I'm I was asking them, what do you want me to do more? And they're like, well, maybe you can do a website. I'm like, websites are a dime a dozen. So one thing led to another. And then from there, that's how I decided to let me just start making videos on YouTube. So that's how I started. And my first video, I think, was late 2016, 2017. I was posting about 2 videos a month. More so from a Hindu educational aspect, because that's what I came from teaching these high school students. And I did that consistently up until 2018. And that's when my life took another track. And that's when I got kids. So my first son was born in August 2018. And I said I was going to take a 3-month break. 3 months turned into 6 months, turned into 1 year, turned into 5 years. So 5 years, I was actually off of Hindu lifestyle. It was pretty insane. And then my second son was born in 2021 during pandemic.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 2023 that I decided to come back to it. There was a lot of people urging me, and honestly, I'm not gonna lie. When I came back, like the whole landscape had changed, because like short form and reels and Instagram and like TikTok wasn't really like a thing back in 2017, 2018, and then when I came back, like it literally felt I was starting from scratch again. Not that I was like big or like anything like that. I think when I stopped making videos, my subscriber count was at about 10,000 on YouTube. I didn't have any Instagram presence or anything like that. But that's so in 2023 October, I rebooted, and I've been doing that. And I would say this last year I tried to focus more on short form, so trying to do both.
Right.
Still, and I still teach at the Mundir, so that's still what I do on a regular basis.
That's awesome, man. So, you know, you know Sammy Vada, right? You know, from
I do.
So he wanted to join, and you know, we've been doing stuff together, and yeah. So just go ahead and say, you know, introduce yourself.
What's up, Shawn? Good to see you again.
Yes, it's good to see you. We met when we were in Houston back in June. Yeah, it was yeah, it was a great time.
Yeah, great time.
What was going on in June?
So I would say like my favorite panel. So there was a Next in Hindu conference, which I think is so important for, you know, just development of the community. You know, young people often not knowing too much about Hinduism outside of being culturally Hindu, get to see and experience different facets. They have these different panels where you can attend. Some happening at the same time, so you get to have a little choice in there. And by far, I think my favorite panel involved Shawn, and who else was on there? It was Ashwin and Vishal and Aditi, Haripriya. And so they just talked about like the future of the Hindu community, what the Hindu community needs. Such an interesting panel. I think it was right in your wheelhouse, which is constantly thinking about how can we continue to educate, how can we continue to grow the community. And what are we lacking? How do we define the word Hindu in the first place to make that community happen? So yeah, I was locked in the entire time when I watched it.
Yeah, it really actually was a good discussion. One of the things that I've been sort of focusing on, I would say the last little bit, is like making sense of a Hindu identity. And part of that question is, well, how do you define a Hindu? And I mean, you can spend hours sort of trying to dissect that. But I would say, and then I would say that the next step, being Hindu in North America, is how is it that you embrace that identity? Like, what does it take? Is it okay to be just culturally Hindu? Does it require more? You know, and then that is kind of where the discussion went. Yeah.
No, I mean, so I want to put a pin in that for a second. That's important conversation. But I want to get back to you, Shawn, because like, so you've done this for the past now roughly 8 years, give or take the 5 years that you were gone. But like you said, your content's also changed a little bit. Earlier when you started the channel, it was more short form and really going through a quick snippet. And now you've started doing much more longer form. Kind of, you know, what spurred you first to do short form, and who are you trying to reach in that short form, and then who are you trying to reach now? Or is it the same?
So I would say that in 2016, 2017, if you kind of look at sort of just from the whole YouTube platform, videos were probably 5 minutes at the time.
Yeah.
And longer form certainly wasn't the thing. The only time you would see longer form on YouTube is like if people were doing full out documentaries, but a lot of the talking head stuff maxed out at maybe 7 minutes or so. So that's sort of where I fit in. A lot of it was educational. Sometimes there would be videos where I'd push back on sometimes things that you would see in the media. And then when I stopped, and then when I came back, that sort of 4 to 5 minute video kind of went to the wayside, and then short form became even shorter. So like reels on Instagram, TikTok, you know, that sort of changed the entire game, because there were so many creators that had entered into that space that I really, because during the pandemic, because having a kid changed your life, like it completely kind of threw my life upside down, that I totally like I left the entire YouTube scene. I would log in like every so often looking at my like stats and like everything else.
Right.
But the entire scene really did change. And there certainly was an explosion because everyone's home now. So everyone had a camera. There was a lot of people that came to that scene. When I came back to YouTube, I tried doing that same format. And I think what ended up happening is that there was such a plethora. There was so many people making content on just Hinduism now that I had to kind of rethink, okay, what is it that I bring that's a little bit different? So that's when I kind of went back to, you know, my upbringing as a Hindu from the Caribbean. And what I did was I tried to bring my perspective growing up as a Canadian with Indo-Caribbean roots and sort of bring out the history, because I think what becomes important is the studying of our history to see how is it that Hinduism survived. And that speaks to sort of this coalescing of a Hindu identity in North America that we have right now, because there are people like my ancestors who went through it. And what is it that we can learn, not just in Trinidad, but Guyana and Suriname and Mauritius and Fiji? What are the lessons to be learned there? Because I really do see that playing out right now in North America right now. Yeah, that and I think it's a story that Hindus around the world just need to hear, because many people, you know, even when I meet Hindus, you know, at the Next Gen Hindu Youth Conference or any conference that I go to, many people don't even know that there's Indians in the Caribbean, much less how Hinduism survived. So I think that's a perspective that I'm trying to bring through my YouTube and social media.
Yeah. Hey guys, I want to introduce Mohan from Itiha. He produces also content on some great stuff on YouTube. He's been working with me. Sammy's been working with me. We've been trying to build this Meru thing and a bit more to be more inclusive, because I'm old, right? Look at the gray. So like I'm not that connected to like the TikToks, the TikToks and the stuff that all you guys are into. So my kids are, but like, you know, I'm seeing it. But no, and I appreciate this, Shawn, because I think the point you're driving, I think it's so important. There's experiences, and I mean our experiences, and then trying to convey that to the younger generation who have their own separate experiences about how it feels to be Hindu Canadian, Caribbean Hindu. They're very different. Like these experiences are so different, right? Because the Caribbean Hindu experience is 200 years of distance from India and mainland Hinduism, and how that Hinduism shifts, and how the people going from the Caribbean go to the other parts of the world, and how that religion goes with them and shifts with them. I think at some of this is like, it's not talked about enough, and it's not really engaged with it enough. People spend way too much time talking about, like, I think caste and the social elements in India, rather than like what it is to be Hindu in outside of India. And we just get thrown in across the board with Indians and Hindus in India, or even Hindutva, or any of these things. And we're very, very different. So I think what you're doing is really interesting, because like your videos are well produced, man. I mean, you have a great camera. Look at the background. It's fantastic. You do such a good job, and you're stylish. I look like a hobo that just came down from the mountain, so I think it's such a cool, like, flashy, and kind of grabs people by the hands and say, come join us. So I think it's really cool. And then Mohan does such great AI stuff and voiceover stuff, and Sammy's on his TikTok, doing all that. So you guys are doing some great stuff, and appreciate you guys joining me. But
I think Shawn figured out his YouTube game. Hey, nice meeting you all. I know I follow you on all social medias, but it was nice meeting you in person. I'm not a person who comes in front of camera. I don't have those fancy lights and whatnot. I figured I should get something for next time, but so all cool.
Start with what you have, man. That's the most important thing. Just start with whatever you have. When I started off, I was recording in my sort of family room with my webcam. I had a little like pin-on mic, and my first two videos, there was so much static because the mic was like hidden in my clothes that I had to spend like 4 hours doing two videos, and I'm like, I don't know how this is gonna turn out, but
I just wasted years waiting for perfection that I
Yeah,
realized,
no.
no, it's the wrong
Just-
strategy. You got
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And that was the same thing with me. I was just like, so I was like, I didn't see that much really good long form content online.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I was interested in that because I want to explore these ideas more. And I just jumped in, had bad mics, bad cameras. Not that it's changed that much since then. But still, like, for me, the important part was getting these ideas out, these conversations out. And I found that in that process, I mean, first of all, I learned so much more than I ever knew before, and started having a community of people that are very interested in this stuff. Most of you guys I met, on Twitter because of the podcasts, and that sort of relationship. So have you built a really good relationship not only with your audience on, like, say, the social media, but also in person, or how's that work for you, Shawn?
So I would say that the social media aspect really is sort of that lead to actually having more in-person events. I got my start teaching kids, like young adults, so high school going into university, and that is where I find that you have, for myself anyways, where that impact is.
Yeah.
And you also have to meet that sort of demographic where they are as well. And the funny thing is that being on social media, like, my intention was never to make it like a full-time profession, like where I'd give up my job, but it was just to provide a voice, because even back in 2017, 2018, when you looked up anything related to Hinduism, all you were finding were like the aunties and uncles from India talking about Hinduism, but it was no one from a North American perspective trying to kind of make sense of, like, what is it like growing up where when you walk out of your house, you're not seeing like a Hindu environment? What does that really entail? And how is it that you're able to sort of maintain that? And I think every Monday that I have attended is that it's the same struggles from the parents, is that they're trying to articulate that. And I think
Right.
that is where I sort of find the benefit of social media, because these last 2 years have really been sort of a change for me, because people are sort of finding me either on Instagram now or YouTube, and then they're reaching out saying, hey, are you available to come out to do a workshop, to be on like panels speaking about this? And I think that's where, as much as you want to say that you have X amount of followers on all of these platforms, it really is this one-on-one contact in smaller groups that you're probably going to see the biggest change. So that's how I see it right now. And I think that that's how I intend to use it. Many people even now ask me, like, if I had a chance to do it full time, will I do it? I'm like, but what does that really entail? Because you're just
Right.
making it more content, but are you reaching the people that you want to reach, right? And I think in person meeting is where it's probably going to come a full 360. I honestly see it happening, because more and more young people that I speak to, they're actually not staying on social media anymore. I mean, there's so much
Right.
stuff out there about, being on your phones and like all and all of that. So I think if I can use this as a platform to generate more leads, where there's more opportunities to meet one-on-one, that I think is where you get most bang for your buck.
Yeah. I mean, Mohan and Sam, if you guys have anything to say, go ahead. But like, otherwise, I was going to say, one of the things, and I appreciate that, is it's like, I don't know, and this is just maybe my own position, but like this idea that one needs to make this a full-time career, even if the possibility occurs, I think might be, in my head, can be problematic, because this becomes then like a way not only to make money, but like getting views, and the purpose shifts. I think it when it becomes your sustenance versus a passion, and versus like a seva of sorts, right? Like, it's something that you give to, not to make the center of your life. Because I think this whole part of my problem generally with a lot of like spirituality is when it gets enmeshed with material and wealth, it kind of, one has to give the way to the other. And the work I think we're doing comes from a place of wanting to give rather than take. And I think that, like, when I wouldn't want to merge those two for myself. I don't want to be dependent on this for myself, but I would use this to build something, like in organization where other people can do other things and stuff like that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think I would just differentiate. I think someone using this for like financial need versus what I would say is monetizing it for investment into the community.
Sure.
One, and I'm going to kind of bring another topic to address this, is that one frustration that I've had, just kind of being somewhat of the younger demographic, not for long though, is being just kind of shut out of Hindu spaces in real life, whether it is temples or like the religious classes. They seem to be gate kept by like the higher authority. The temples are the institutions, and they make money, and it's very difficult. And I'm not the only one. I've shared this frustration with so many people at the Next Gen conference as well, where we don't feel like we have a seat at the table. And I think that some of the aspirations that I would have is at least generating not income, but a fund so that we can create our own seat. And and I think part of it is, when I think about who is going to take over temples in 20, 30 years if young people aren't getting involved. I mean, they're going to get dilapidated. And there has to be.
I want to ask you a question on that, Sammy, because where you are, like in the temples you're part of, is it still mostly administered by NRIs from India?
Oh, most definitely.
And how often do you see like people like us, growing up here in this country, involved in the temple at like that level?
I don't see it. I know I don't want to call it any temple specifically. I don't think that's right. But there's
I'll call it all the temples, by the way.
It is all the temples. I mean, yeah, so I guess I am. But like any temple that I've seen, it is run by people who and I think maybe it's like a post-retirement thing too. Maybe like I've worked my 9 to 5 for 40 years. So people in their 70s and 80s decide to retire and dedicate their life to the temple. And that's fine. I'm happy for them. But then it creates a level of disconnect so severe that young people don't have. And I recall a conversation that one of my good friends has, and he's involved in this as well. And one of the questions he got was, well, young people aren't donating to the temple. What is like, we're not getting enough funds from young people. It's only people NRIs or people in their 40s or 50s. And I mean, his response is, what have you done for them? What networking events are here, or what events are there for youth here? Or, and so it's often framed that we're this generation of ungrateful people. But I just don't think that, and we try to assert it, it's like we're still seen as like not like people in our mid to late 20s. We're seen as people who are like teenagers who are like, know enough, like whatever, blah, 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 your time will come. But it needs to be now. And so just bring it back, it's just like monetary that's where I think I would be very open to generating funds for that type of activity. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to ask Mohan, being, from India and being in the US for so many years, have you been involved in the temple communities, and what have you seen from your perspective?
So my views are very similar to Sammy. I am, when I was of his age, mid 20s, kind of, I went there and I didn't feel like I belonged in those temples. All the people in their late 40s, early 50s, they had the high ground, and they were dictating, kind of treating us like, oh, you don't know, just listen to us, stop. So I felt very disconnected, and I also felt like they're getting more into a commercial vibe, like generate more revenue. Then there is very less spirituality. I would be very interested if they did something like Sanskrit classes in the temple, or use the space for community teaching, teach music, which, one of the things I've noticed growing up in India was I had friends who got converted into Christianity just because they wanted to learn guitar. They just spent there and gone. So those were, and I always felt like we Hindus as a community, we are failing to build community, especially in the temples. And that's my observation as well. And since then, I've reduced. I just go there, pray for some time. I have a few temples which are, peaceful for me, but I don't get involved in any of it.
I will say there's a temple that I go to here in LA and Torrance. I think they're probably getting a new facility. Panchamukanjane Temple by Narasimhacharya is the Purohit there. They do those things. They do Kannada classes, Telugu classes, Sanskrit classes, and it's a small community, and it's mostly done by NRIs and people from India that have come here. But they've actually built a pretty good community there. I used to go when I was younger to Malibu Temple, and that became overly commercialized, and it's the one you see in the movies when they show in Indian temple. It's the Malibu Temple. It's up in the hills, and it was run by one family for decades, and it becomes, I think, a place. The temple becomes a place of some temples, place of power and like social status. But Shawn, in your community, like in the Caribbean Hindu community, is it is it similar, or how different is that in the temple world? And are you, because now you're involved, like how do you like manage that?
How much time do we have? Let me tell you about my temple history story, because so Hinduism so I don't want to speak for Canada, because I could only speak about the greater Toronto area, because that's where my father came. That's where I grew up. So Hinduism in the greater Toronto area started primarily, I would say largely, not all of it, but by the Hindus from the Caribbean. So in the 60s and the 70s, like immigration had changed in Canada. So Justin Trudeau's father was a prime minister at the time, and he flipped the switch. And a lot of immigrants came because Canada needed workers. So that's when my dad came up. He came up in 72. My wife's father came up in 1980. My mom came up in the mid 70s as well. So a lot of Hindus from Guyana came up. A lot of Hindus from Trinidad came up, and they established places of worship. So the first larger one, if you've ever been to the Toronto area, is the Vishnu Mandir. They were the first to build to put a Hanumanji outside. It's about I want to say like 30, 40 some odd feet high. So they were the largest one. Dr. Dubey is a Hindu pundit. He's a cardiovascular surgeon. He got the Order of Canada a few years ago. So very prominent Hindu Guyanese pundit. Certainly like a leader within our community. He is over 80 years old now. And it was there that my father got his start. And then eventually this branched out. So as more and more immigrants came in, the community got large, and then people started to form their own mandirs and their organizations. So that was my sort of entry, because my father left the Vishnu Mandir and then he went east of the city. And that's where this property was purchased. So it was 7 founding families. My dad had to put up the majority of the money to actually purchase that property. He took out a second mortgage on our home. When the mandir was being built, he took out another mortgage, and it was built up primarily from that. Getting to the organization and how it was run, yes, a lot of these organizations are still run by first-gen immigrants. And that is, I think, the biggest problem. In 2006, I want to say, I was elected to the board of directors. I was in my early 20s at the time. I was elected to the board of directors of that mandir. And it was we're the first mandir in the Toronto area to have someone young on the board. Great. Mm-hmm. When push came to shove, when things got tough with the management group in 2011, 2012, that's when you start to see the cracks fall, because this is such a long story, but there was a disagreement within the management group, and it came down to who are the voting members of the temple, because mandirs in Canada, they're generally like a registered charity. So when you're a registered charity, you need to have a board of directors. They need to have elections. So what this does form is that it does form factions within the mandir. And in 2016, everything came to a head because there were 2 factions, and we were on the side where we were saying that we need to bring in more members for voting so that there is a continuity on to the next generation. And then there was another faction saying that lifetime members that gave X amount of funds, they have voting rights for life. So this got into a lawsuit. I was sued, myself and my father and a whole bunch.
Wow.
It was a huge lawsuit. I'm talking like over $200,000 spent on this thing, 2016. And I remember taking the mic and trying to make a plea to our congregation, to the members at the time, saying, I grew up in the late 90s, the early 2000s, where every one of you were saying that this mandir is being built for the next generation. And I am that next generation. And now you're telling me that we can't take this one step further. And
Right.
I kid you not, I was booed by all of those members. There was so much hatred within that audience, and I still remember it. That it was in 20, and truth be told, it was that election where things got to a head that we actually lost. We lost. So my father was the founding president, was kicked out because we lost that election. But it was that brought me onto social media. So that it was that, yeah, it really was a turning point in my life. And when I kid you that, like, my father sacrificed everything. Like he worked 7 days a week to help service the second mortgage that he took out, and he gave up everything. And to see what had happened, that you lose this election, that people are ready to kick you out. And that is when I had to take a step back and really do an analysis, is that what is this Mandir community really about?
Right.
Because a lot of it, they talk the talk, right? They talk the talk. We're building it for the next generation. You know, we care about Hindus. We care about this. We want to see it. But when it came time for people like me, for people of my age group to say, we're going to step in and now not kick anyone out, but we want to take control and take it. Exactly. No. And that is where I had to take a step back and I say, you know what? And I was teaching at the time. I was running so many of the Mandir programs at the time. And that's when I realized that a lot of the Mandir, like the Mandir itself is fine. It's when you have people that are in these community organizations, they see it as a means to prop up themselves and to raise their esteem within the community. And that's the problem that I have. When you are volunteering in a Mandir, and I think this should apply to anyone, you are a servant. You have to come with that attitude. Right. And if you don't come with that attitude, you're just doing it for your own ego. And I've seen that across the board. I've seen it across the board, and I'm willing to tell that to anyone because I've lived through it. I've seen it. And now what? Now it's coming back that now I go back to the Devi Mandir, and I don't have any ill relations with anyone there. But now people are asking me, so are you going to come back now? Now, you know, where we're looking for younger people. I said, I really feel that ship has sailed right now, but that's sort of where, you know, like that, this story is much longer, but that in essence is sort of like the challenges that I see with first gen immigrants not wanting to give up and think about how is it that we make this an institution versus something to prop up myself and to leave a legacy.
Right. No, and you know that's such an interesting point because I don't think it's that different in the US or
Same.
You know, it feels to me like and part of me is not upset at that generation because they left everything at some point, came here. They're trying to build their world, their life, and their own like social, and in some sense, hierarchy of prestige and whatever. But at the same time, I don't think they recognize like, how do we, as our generation, the generation after us, how are we going to learn about these things? How are we going to learn to work with each other and these differences? Because as generations, you know, get further downstream, there's going to be more and more differences because we have different experiences and different ideas about what the Mandir is meant for and how to use Mandir funds. But how are we going to learn to do that if you're not going to involve us from the get-go at some level, right? And I mean it's interesting because when I see church groups, you know, like, so a lot of my friends are in church groups, are young church leaders groups, right? Where the youth pastors, where they work with, and I'm like, that's a brilliant model, frankly, like where you get the kids involved from a relatively teenage age into the community with activities, with these things. But I haven't been part of a Mundare in a long time in that sense. But like, does that happen? Do we have like youth leaders and representatives and that build maybe like study groups and I don't know.
Yeah, there is one model that I have seen. So it's the Minnesota Hindu Temple Society. If
Okay.
you have a chance, look them up. They actually have like a youth board that is meant to like mimic the
Nice.
older board. Yeah, so it's like it's in essence trying to create a succession. And I think I've shared that with a few of the local Munders here, and I think it's something that more and more it certainly needs to happen.
Yeah, Sammy, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would, just to take to what you were alluding to, it's not. I when I first got to the Hindu community and you notice a lack of young people involved, my first reaction is just, oh yeah, I guess young people don't care about this much, and then there is truth to that, but ultimately, I think it was, and again, I don't want to put so much blame on a generation, but there is a clear disconnect between both of these and a lack of providing opportunities to it. And I love what Shawn said. There was so much talk, especially growing up. I grew up in Chinmay Mission. And you know what? Chinmay Mission, for what it's worth, actually did a pretty good job, but relatively. But, so much of, we want to pass this legacy on. We want you guys to get involved. We want you to teach. But then when the opportunity comes to organize these events, we're shut down at every turn. And
Right.
so I guess, Mike, the question I'd pass off to you is this, to me, I don't know if it's a fight I'm even capable worth winning of trying to find my footing in these institutions that are so deeply ego oriented. I think I want to like carve my own path, find my own way, organize my own. So what I've done is like, I've organized my own community here in Dallas and DFW. We meet up, get chai, talk about Vedanta for like 2 hours. Shout outs to Anil, leads the conversation. So
you can have join too, man.
yeah. So we will do the stuff like that. We'll go to the temple together. And the other thing I actually want to talk about is just recently, and this is going all over DFW, Indian social media. They're building a massive Ganapati temple here, which is great. I'm happy. Cool. Giant Ganapati statue is about to show up here. A lot of Christians about to get mad. Second problem is with that is, one of my really good friends pointed out that what is the recreational activity here? Like, is there opportunity for us to go hang out? In Dallas, and I'll let everyone know, is that there's not a whole lot to do here. It's not a whole lot of tourist activity going on here. It's food and alcohol. And so if I'm with my friends and we're trying to figure out something to go do, it would be such an easy thing to build a basketball court. And we can go play some basketball, maybe some pool or something like that. And there's a temple right there. And that we can go do pranam for a little bit. It builds a little bit of consciousness.
Yeah.
And these are just easy things. And they brag about how much money they have. Oh, it's going to be the most. I mean, they're putting millions of dollars into it. They talk about how much donations they got. So there isn't an excuse. You cannot tell me they can't afford to do these things. And and I know we got a lot of hate for this, and I hate to push back against, since a lot of like Americans and Canadians were against this. Is I saw the Ram temple in Mississauga, and that's great. I'm happy there's a Ram statue there, but sometimes I think about, are these things just like, it's a false appearance of how prominent we are in the community, that we can build large statues. That's great, that's cool, but and then we invited a lot of hate to ourselves. What I would prefer is that the money that can go into that go into organizing isn't as in your face, and people aren't going to push back at that, yet you build a long lasting foundation to further organizing in your community. So I mean, these are things to think about. Yeah, there
was an article that was published by VHP America speaking primarily about that, the how Hindus have failed to organize properly at a national level, both in, you could talk about the USA, but as well as in Canada. And because a lot of what happens is that the money goes to the Mandirs, but they don't know what to do with it. So they ended up just building more and more things. But in terms of building institutions, people don't see value in that because it's not something tangible, because you want, like, building an institution that can advocate for itself, that can do all the things that, like, what a Hindu group should have in North America is something that we have been lacking. But to speak to your point about, like, what are the facilities and stuff that our local Mandirs are offering, that I think is something that I think every Mandir needs to look at. One of the first things that we did in growing up, in our late teens and our early 20s in the 2000s was like a Hindu youth group that wasn't like like an arm of the temple to do volunteer work. It was a social group. It was a social group to get Hindu youth together. So that means going on trips, having social nights, bowling nights, games nights, then having like we did once a year formals where we had like a dinner and a dance, like Hindu dinner and a dance. What's the problem in that? So these are all things that we did growing up. And I would say that it really helped. And I think other communities now need to start doing the same things. Mm-hmm. The problem is that you need to have leadership that is willing to just listen and just say, hey, let's just try something different. And that's the problem that I see. So what I'm trying to do right now is that, like, because now that I have kids, there's like a whole other ball game, like, aspect that I'm involved now is trying to find people of my age group, like, that are in their 30s and their 40s now, who have kids, who have now stepped away from the temple. Like, these are people that I grew up with that mm-hmm. when they're, now they're older and now they're established in their careers and they have kids, but they're nowhere to be found now, because when they were younger growing up, the Mandir didn't have anything to offer them. So now, their community growing up is not the temple. When we were kids, like, our parents brought us there because our parents were first-gen immigrants. So the temple was their community. But you grow up in America now, or you grow up in Canada, your community is outside. So like, why am I going to the temple for, right? And to speak to what Sammy was saying is that, you start forming your own groups, like, and you figure out what is it that you need to do. And I think there's a lot of work that could be done to sort of strengthening what the Hindu temple is, things that they can do, but it requires leadership to actually recognize that things need to change.
I mean, if I could throw something in here, I think we might even need to reconsider what the temple is in the diaspora, right? Yep. Like, it cannot be the way the temples are in India. Like, you just come in, you do your prayers, and you leave, right?
So let me stop you there. Yeah, because this was the argument that my father and myself would have with every NRI that we would meet at the temple, because the model that we had in the Greater Toronto area was a holdover of our colonial legacy from the Caribbean, because
which is Mandir, what, by the way?
Yeah, so let me explain it. That when indentureship happened, so when Indians came, they were working on the sugarcane field. They were working in agriculture. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sunday was the day of rest. Why? Because that's when the Christians had their day of rest. When did Hindus congregate? On a Sunday. Where did they congregate? They probably met in people's homes. And this is what was established, is that they followed that model. And it wasn't just going for darshan because there wasn't a temple with a deity. It was satsang that you were having with your community. And that model that is what transferred. And that is how the Mandir ecosystem in Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, that is what evolved, is that you congregated once a week. It wasn't just something where you went to for 5 minutes, but you went and you spent and you formed those relations with the people that you are with. And that's sort of what has happened now, sort of organically in North America. Yes, for a lot of the West Indian Mandirs in the Greater Toronto area, they follow the same model that they left. But if you look at the predominantly like North Indian Mandirs that are in the Toronto area, now they follow the same thing. They have one large satsang a week, and they use it to congregate. So this is sort of, we're seeing in real time like an evolution of what it means to be Hindu in North America. But you tell this to anyone from India and they're like, no, we don't follow this because we're not Christian and we're not doing this. Like, we go for darshan, we don't need to follow this. And I'm like, but it's two different environments, right?
I mean,
yeah. Go ahead, Mohan.
Even I grew up in India. I just came here a decade ago. I think even in India, I think we should improvise. Like Sundays are the days where everyone is free. Maybe we should have some community events. Every street has a temple. I think we are still stuck in the past, and we are losing that ability to instill values when they are young. And once they grow old, they're not in control of any parents. So that's how it's happening over there.
Well, in India, the thing is, I think with India, it's every day is a holy day in some sense, right?
Yeah.
There's people, yes, they're working Monday through Friday and then like Saturday, Sunday, but if there's a religious event, people are gone in the evenings, right? It's so built into the nature of people there. I think it happens just as part of their activities. But I think here, I mean, the point that Shawn is making is, I would agree. Like, part of this has to be the Hindu society in the diaspora, particularly, needs to take the things that work for other communities in America, right? Like, I don't know how masjids are in other parts of the world, and do they give sermons or not in Arabia? I don't know. I have no clue, but I know here they do. And so in America they do. And part of that is because our culture is built around these kind of this hyper rationalization, or what does this tradition or thing mean to me in my life? So how do I make it? So and in our mandirs, like, we have great priests, purohits, and maharajas that can do the ritual fantastically. But sometimes you ask them to explain this to you, there's difficulty, right? It's not like a preacher or pastor whose job is to merely speak. There's no liturgy that they have to do. We have to be masters of liturgy and then explain what the liturgy is to everyone else. And I think this is where it's like Chinmaya does a great job of this, and a few of these other like Balavihar groups do, but they're actually not connected to the temple. They're all their own separate organizations, and they once in a while come use the temple. And this is where the temple has to shift. You have to have like a rec center, I think. I think it's important because part of this is like physical activity is very important, and it's a great way for people to keep that bond and relationship. Maybe there has to be something for all, other arts and stuff, and there has to be an element of like preaching. And I hate that term, but like that's truly what has to happen. People have to know why are we worshiping this form of Krishna versus that form of Krishna, or Durga this way versus Kali. I mean, like right now you see someone post on Twitter or whatever, oh, this this demon Kali, whatever, and Hindus don't know how to respond. They just don't. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, we don't have the tools, and that's because we haven't been taught those tools at a deep level. We just kind of we do the dance, the song, whatever, but we don't have any way to explain it. Like if you ask a Christian, why does Jesus have to die for my sins? Their first response is, well, your sins were God, Adam and Eve, and this and that, and then they can lay it out. What does any Hindu know about any of their tradition, and especially our generations?
So I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, just that is precisely sort of the topics that when I started teaching these classes at the temple is what I hope to address, because it was something that I did not have growing up. And I said, if I'm going to become the teacher, I'm like, well, what is it that if I was growing up, what is it that I would want? And it's precisely everything that you just said is what is needed and what needs to be provided more. And just one other thing that I think that mandirs today in 2025 need to be focused on is that when you look at the millennial generation, that's the generation that are now in their 30s and their 40s right now. They're the ones with younger kids. Mm-hmm. What is it that you need to do to attract that sort of target demographic? And if you look, I just look at my own peer group, and it's like everyone has their kids in programs. So what programming is the Mandir? Now, a lot of Mandirs do offer music classes. They offer dance classes, but the classes that you also need is like classes on Hinduism. Just explaining about, and not just explaining like Hindu topics, because social media has a lot of that, but it's also knowing how to defend yourself, as you rightfully said. Like, someone puts out a tweet about Mat Kali, like, what's the first thing you're going to say? These are all the aspects that we have to be able to address. From a social side of things, like I've been to so many birthdays in these like treehouse playgrounds right now. I'm like, what's stopping a Mandir that has a property from like saying, okay, we're going to build something where you can now, for your son or daughter's birthday, you're going to bring them in.
Yeah.
We'll do a small puja for your family. And then after, you'll have a cake table. There'll be a bouncy castle. You could do all of that stuff there. Like these are like things that what is it that you're going to bring people in? And I think if Mandirs can now sort of see outside of what they're used to, it is really going to change. But the big but is that you need people on top to actually make those changes.
Yeah, that's right. And if they don't understand what the needs of the other generation are, I mean, what are they going to do? They're going to keep doing the same thing they've been doing.
Yep.
Go, Sammy, you got something to say, man?
Yeah. So, just co-sign everything that was being said so far. On just being able to answer these questions, I do want to shout. I don't want to say his name if he doesn't feel comfortable, but I'll tell you maybe after the show. But he is planning on he's been doing a lot of Gita commentary, youth organization, been pretty successful in being able to do it at his university. And now that he's kind of finished, he's trying to take it sort of outside of the university and throughout all of Texas. And so actually it's interesting that Texas A&M, they have a little Indian Christian, it's called Sprite, I believe. I'll double check on that name. Don't quote me on that. And so they actually invite people to come discuss, theology with people. And I think it'd be so appropriate. So we actually planned this. It's coming up in maybe 1 or 2 months, is that we're going to bring a camera crew and we're going to kind of pull up to this spot. And as Hindus, and I have a really good Malayali friend who is very, very versed in Vedanta, also does wrestling. So like very much about the things we're talking about. And we're going to have a really good discussion. And this will be a good place. It's youth oriented, right? You have a young Indian Christian, young Indian Hindu talking it out. We're going to bring our camera crew so we can show our perspective of things. And it would attract a lot of people, and that would be very educational to what are the common things that Christians don't understand about Hinduism and the very basic nuances. Things like that, I think, spark passion for more people to get involved. And so when it comes to even taking power for ourselves, I think numbers is, I think, the ultimate, factor, which is to come in large numbers and say, here, this is the things that we're looking for. These are the things that we want. And so, stuff like this is what churns the organization capabilities of a religious group. So these are just things I've been thinking about. Yeah.
No, great ideas.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Juan.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. I always, if you need anything, Sammy, I'll be fine to help you out. I have so many friends in Dallas area, man. It's just I just need an excuse to fly in over there. And the food part, that's the best food here, I think.
Houston's a little bit better, but yeah, for sure.
So, on that point, I mean, this is a point we all brought up earlier, which is then what is, first of all, what's a Hindu? And do you think our generation of second and third generation identifies as that, or even cares to identify as that, or do we identify with our Indian, South Asian labels over our Hindu label?
So yeah, what is a Hindu? Yeah. So that, I always have to go back to what did my ancestors go through? So whether it be my grandparents or my great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents, and Hindu was everything that you were not. So when they were brought over to the Caribbean, like they were faced with, the African slaves that were brought in. There was, of course, the colonial powers that were there, and all of the Christian theology. And Hindu was all the practices, the traditions, the lifestyle, how they spoke, the food they ate. So it encompassed cultural as well as spiritual traditions. A lot of those practices that they did were basically a snapshot of just the village life that they came from. There wasn't any complex or complicated pujas or rituals that they brought with them, but it was a lot of, very simple agricultural type lifestyle and the rituals that were associated with that. So a Hindu for me right now, if I were to sort of take that example, is that you have to be able to differentiate what your core beliefs are from everyone else that is around you. And that is not to say that you're doing that from a sense that you are better than anyone else, but you need to articulate what is it that makes you different than all those that are around you. What are the beliefs that a Hindu has that is opposite to what a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist has? And I think if we can talk about Hinduism from that point of view, that certainly helps to kind of form what that identity is. And I mean, this was something that had come up at the Next Gen Hindu Youth Conferences as well, because a lot of times when we talk about Hinduism, we talk about it as, it is a welcoming tradition. It is a tradition that that everyone is entitled to their own path. But then, like, if you try to peel away the layers of that, does that mean that a Christian falls into like the Hindu tradition? And I think these are the things that we have to be very careful about. The path that we want to walk.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly what you're saying, is that if you just define yourself as, oh, it's free and everyone, then it doesn't have an actual definition. There is no definition. And I love what you were saying about like. And this is we need to keep talking about this because it's not talked about enough, is using the model that the Guyanese had, and I think, or the Caribbean in general, how they were able to put through. I think Hinduism has this very beautiful trend, which is why I'm not too worried at the end of the day, is that we have this beautiful, I don't know, maybe it's divine or the people themselves, a mixture of both, of surviving the worst conditions, and somehow Hinduism found a way to, I don't want to say redefine itself, but truly define itself in a place where, it's not, in India, it's very regional oriented. You have Telugu Hinduism, you have Tamil Hinduism, you have like South, Bihari and UP. And you had all of these people taken from different parts of India, and they're all put into this island in the Caribbean with a bunch of other religions and under harsh circumstances, certainly not welcome, heavily antagonized on the basis of their religion. And so they had to come together and truly dig deep to organize and be able to define themselves truly. In America, that pressure isn't there to do so, I guess, because we come in numbers and because I guess we do well financially for the most part, to make that happen. But when it comes down to it, America ought to follow the very same models, not the very same, but very much look to the Caribbean as inspiration and how we need to move here. And unfortunately, I think a lot of NRIs are so caught up in their cultural baggage or their ego from wanting to impose that onto here, is that they're creating a lot of incongruence between different types of Hindu community groups. And I think that also serves as a problem. So I don't know, you have to find balance, because people do like what they were experiencing back in India, but they had no choice. They had to evolve.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I will have a bit of a pushback here, because I do think, while I do understand the need for distinction and the need for demarcation, part of the beauty and the underlying ideas of Hinduism is the syncretic nature of it, right? Like, if there's some level that Hinduism is claiming to be universal, right, and it's applying across time, space, and whatever, then, and we believe at some level that Ishvara, Paramatma, comes down and gives knowledge to all people in all places and times, then would not Christianity, Islam, and various other religions be somewhat of a part of Hinduism, even though they might be differentiated? Would they not have divine truths and some level of that? I mean, I'm not saying that we need to take that perspective. I'm just saying that's something we got to grapple with, right? Like at some level, what Christians and Muslims and other people can do is they can explain away us by saying it's demonic, it comes from demons, there's whatever it is, but we shouldn't do the explaining away. We need to explain the phenomenon of the world and those other traditions. And I'm just placing it to you guys. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
So if I were to take my own experience, like growing up as a Hindu from Trinidad, we celebrated Christmas, right? Now, not only Christmas, but even Eid and Ramadan is not that you would celebrate it like religiously, but it is observed, right? Because everyone was sort of put into this pressure pot that and everyone was like they just became brothers and sisters regardless of your faith. How I like to see it is that you can be accepting of what someone else believes. Right? That I think is the first step that a Hindu can certainly make, is that I can be accepting of that. A Christian wants to believe X, Y, and Z. That's fine. Where I draw the line is where I now take that to the next step and say that the path of a Christian is the same as the path of a Hindu, because there are some fundamentals where things differ. Sure. So I think on a grand scheme of things, if everyone was accepting of everyone's individual path, we probably wouldn't have had the history of the world that we have had. But you can see what happens when you're not accepting of someone else's path, what ends up happening. We have the Crusades. We have all the current geopolitics that are happening right now, without mentioning countries and stuff. But I mean, this is the fundamental issue that we have. So I don't have an issue, and I think no Hindu will ever have an issue saying, hey, you do what you have to do. But this concept of, and in the comments, mutual respect, right? And it's something that like a lot of people speak about. Mutual respect has to work two ways. So you did say that like a Christian or someone else would kind of explain away the practices of a Hindu, but a Hindu would never try to explain away the practices of a Christian. So what's the balance there now? Because now we're not playing on a level field. And I think that's the problem we have right now, is that the Hindu wants to be all accepting of all the teachings because that's in our nature. But when the other side doesn't want to do it, then what are you left with? How is it that you face that?
This is why.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is why I have no problem telling anybody that exclusivist religions are wrong. I don't mind doing that. If I were to give a lecture on it, I don't mind doing it in a debate, that what you're believing is incorrect. And I think you can substantiate that with, if you're holding to this idea that I'm right and everyone else is wrong, that's an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary evidence. And I think that also is something that we should be normalizing in our community. I don't think there's anything politically incorrect about that, saying that another religion is incorrect. I think 2/3 of the religions of the United States have that belief. And putting that into the way we move in Western societies. I have no problem with that. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, go ahead, Mon. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think in one sense, I kind of agree. If I look at the bigger picture, most Hindus lack Shatrubodh, and they don't know how the other community is perceiving us. So that's the main problem where they fall behind.
Yeah, I mean, so I will say this. This is where I do get a bit torn. Well, I clearly do identify 100,000% as a Hindu, and I do think that exclusivist claims are frankly idiotic in the grand scheme of the universe. I do have to, at some level, be like, okay, there's something that the Paramatma decided to let these ideas or promulgate these ideas out in the world. Because, I mean, just philosophically, nothing can exist without the will of the Lord, right? You know, from our perspective, whether you're Advaitin, Vishnu Advaitin, whatever tradition you belong to, like there's nothing exists outside the will of the Lord. So if those other things exist, he lets them exist for some good outcome, eventual outcome, right? Whether like the Purana say something about like Buddhism being created by the Lord to delude the asuras, or you know, this and that, you know, to eventually get them back to the Vedic path. You know, there's all those different stories. But in my perspective, I think from our world, we have to use a differentiation mark to say, look, we are different because we're not exclusive. And number two, we don't expect people to. And the bigger one is we don't believe in eternality of hell or heaven, and those kind of really deeply problematic philosophical or theological positions. And the exclusive, not just the exclusivist claims as to how to get the truth, but the way to get to truth, right? Because they're exclusive not just to who you have to pray to, but how you have to pray, and then what you have to do on the other side. And I don't think those things are true. So yeah, I think we have to differentiate on those matters and the distinctions, and say we are Hindu because we have a more universal truth than you do. You guys are truth with a little t. We're the big T that eats your tea. That's the kind of mentality I approach is, you know, like I can take your viewpoint within my framework and still have it hold. Well, can you take our framework within your framework and have it hold? I don't think so.
And I think that's sort of one of the biggest problems that I have is and I was always uncomfortable with this growing up, and I couldn't really put it into words, was when I would be attending like a function and you would have a speaker up there come and then they would start talking about all, like, you know, the phrase that all religions are the same, and I used to take it back with me, right? You know, and I know this has been debated ad nauseum and stuff, but it's still something that, like, it still irks me because I still hear it today as well, is that all religions are the same, they all have the golden rule, and all of these kind of things, but like somehow logically these things are not compatible. Like there might be aspects of certain things that are compatible at some level, but when you talk about the deeper truths, spiritual truths that like Hinduism speaks about, I don't know if I can find that in any other religion. And to get to your point that at some level, you know, the grace of the Lord had to like will it to happen in a sense, yes, like, but at the same time it also gave us that power of discrimination to sort of figure out what is it that, like, where is that I find that big T truth. And I think that's sort of like the perspective that I like to take. At the same time, I mean I don't think I've ever told anyone that you should become Hindu. I don't think that I've ever told someone else, but frequently, like the reverse is not true. Like, you know, you meet people on the subway here and they want to hand you something, and I mean these are things that I think as a Hindu, like what is our response to that? Like you meet someone, you know, and they want to convert you. What is your response?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's a fair point, and I think in the way I approach this is, well, the reason Hindus don't have to convert or try that is, number one, we're like, okay, you have your journey, you'll get there, and you know, you're a Christian now, you're a Muslim now, okay, chota, eventually you'll get to Buddha, you know, like, you know, that's so that's kind of the mentality, right? You know, this is this idea that fundamentally, like, and look, I don't want to deride the other traditions. Christianity and Islam do have great mystical traditions too, right? They have, like, you know, people like, you know, Teresa of Avila, Assisi on the Christian side, you know, or even you know, on the Muslim side, even Arabi, you know, Al-Razi, all these like really wonderful thinkers that give you the sense of, like, you know, fana or this oneness of God and things like that. But the traditional religion itself doesn't seem to have those things, right? And I think with our traditional religion, even you go to the mandir, there's still the sense that you're a part of that supreme entity. You're this all connected together. This is all part of that one being. And why you shouldn't hurt others is because they're part of that being, the same supreme being, right? So yes, in that sense, like there's something deeper at play within our framework. I think that's just more explicit, and that comes out. So to your point about when a Christian comes and says to me, like, tries to convert me, depends on what avenue, because then I'm like, well, you have to explain to me why, if your God is giving you the perfect book, is the perfect intelligence, and I'll be like, is he the perfect communicator? Yes. And he's the perfectly logical being? Yes. Then how is it by reading his book, I don't believe anything he says? Because if he's a perfect communicator with the perfect truth, the perfect way to convey it to me, then I should just by reading the book believe and know. But it doesn't happen. So therefore, your God doesn't have those things. So there's a problem here. So you got to address that. So, and then they're like, well, it's your free will. No, my free will, he knows too. So he knew either I was going to believe him or not. So you're left to this point of like,
Exactly.
I mean, free will doesn't solve the problem, guys. I mean, like, as much as you want to say free will, it either is God is all knowing, and then philosophers like Alva Plantinga and a few other people will be like middle knowledge and skeptical theism, and I'm like, all that's like mumbo jumbo. Like, it's a way to get around this ultimateness of this perfect knowledge. Yeah. But yeah, that's how I would respond. I mean, you guys tell me how you guys do it.
I like Shawn's thing. I take it a little bit step further, which is that, yeah, I think God, Paramatma, Parabrahm, whatever, the will of the universe, as the Sikhs would put it, the hukam, they would, I think it's all there for our discernment. And, what's really interesting, actually, and I'll say this, is that you meet like, a middle-aged, maybe a little older woman attending church every day, lives in a small town in America, rural America. I mean, this is her life. And, just from an atheist perspective, if an atheist were to like, tell you, oh, your God's not real, hear all the messianic prophecies that Jesus failed to fulfill, these are all the contradictions in the Bible, hear all the contradictions in the theology, like that'd be soul crushing to just a 6-year-old who just wants to go and pray to God and be part of her life every day. Right. And then you have to also weigh that with that same woman that finds so much peace in this, that has so much peace with this, is that it holds problematic beliefs. It might be the same person that goes and points at a Ram statue or a Ganesh statue and says, oh, this is demonic, we need to get these demons out of here. And so there is a double-edged sword when it comes to these sort of exclusivist beliefs. It might bring comfort to people. And this is where I do think that Dharma needs to take a more aggressive approach, and not just like, oh, you need to be as if. I think proselytizing could be defined as believe in this or you go to hell. And I think what I would take it as is that maybe it should be something to the effect of, this is what we understand. This is why our practices can bring you genuine benefit in life. This is where our community has hold values that are genuinely beneficial, like vegetarianism, not even vegetarianism, but general compassion for other beings, and how this can produce meaningful outcomes for people. And through just education, which we have tradition, we call this prachar, right? That is something that is viable. And that, yes, to me, doesn't necessarily mean that like it requires designating exclusivist religions as straight up false. I think, and I think you can sense that falsehood in the way that they sort of demonize other religions. And I think that doing it as innocently as doing that, I think, is enough without having to scare people into going to hell.
And no, I appreciate your point there, Sammy, about like, what if this old woman comes and talks to you and she believes this, so I think there has to be a demarcation in terms of when you're in a debate, then you go true, you go hard. But there's this beautiful verse by the apparently condemnable text Manusmriti, right? Satyam bruvate priyam brurna bruvate satyam apriyam priyam chan artam bruhudesha dharmaha sanatanaha, right? This is idea that you speak the truth. You speak the agreeable. He says what's true, what's agreeable, but he should not say what is true but disagreeable, nor should he say what is agreeable but untrue. This is the eternal law, dharma sanatana, right? This idea that when you're engaging with people, you should speak the truth, but speak it pleasantly or with that's agreeable. But if you're going to hurt someone, don't say anything, right? And so just unless you're in these debates and engagements, then you can go decisive. Because if you read like any of the text of these debates, these people their scholars they're deadly. Like one of them will call like the slap in the face of your philosophy, the slap back across your face. These are the tattva mukha, there's a bunch of these texts. So it's very interesting, but I do think we should show more compassion than they would show to us, because at some level that's kind of our philosophy, right? We can't lose our soul in a bid to win a war. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Yeah, I guess what I grapple with is that because generally, we are not a proselytizing religion. Religion in quotation marks.
Right.
The question is it something that is necessary? And I bring that up just because when I look at sort of, and I mean, whatever opinion you have on ISKCON or things, but if you look at the work that they're doing, in sense of trying to bring people into a dharmic fold,
yeah,
is there not value in what they're doing? Because they have certainly taken a different approach. Now, of course, the way they're doing it is not violent by any means, but is there value in that? Because it's something that a lot of Hindus, as a point of pride, would say is that, we try not to convert others. But is there not something where we can now look to see, well, would the world be a better place if more people adhere to the values of what Sanatan Dharma has to offer? And that's where I think sometimes we sort of have to sort of tread the path and kind of see that, is that maybe there is some value in trying to spread it in that sense, and not just rely it on osmosis, like how a lot of times throughout history, how Hinduism has spread.
Yeah, I don't think Hinduism's not proselytizing, because we do it, but we do it in other ways. Our goal isn't to get you to convert because for numbers game or whatever, or save your soul, because we don't believe that, right? Like, for example, how does Southeast Asia all become Hindu? Is like, there's an element of you go out, you speak your religion. If you want to join, come join, and we'll give you the means to join. But you don't go out you don't do good things in order to get more souls.
Yeah.
You do good things because they're supposed to be done, right? And this is where I find, like, on the Christian side, yes, they've built many hospitals and all have done great things to the poor. But I also think there's that element of, to the poor, we also can proselytize them. It's easier to bring them to our fold. When I think for the Hindus, which is also why historically when Hindu kings, and these various communities, they gave to the poor, they gave freely to the poor. There was no sense of of all religions, with no expectation that you come and become Hindu or whatever, right? So I do think this idea of proselytization, we shouldn't think of it as being negative. We should rechange the word or the meaning of that, or the way people think about it, to a way that's more dharmic, like dharmic, like engagement. I don't know, something like that.
So okay, so let me just throw in another thing now. So, I mean, you've seen the debates on Twitter as to that Hindu is someone that is ethnically Indian. So, right. So how does that fit into it? Because, I mean, sometimes when I read what a lot of people say, I'm like, sometimes Hindus are their worst, their own worst enemy, right? It's like, here you are trying to paint like a global picture of what Sanatan Dharma has to offer, but then there is still something intrinsically that we want to hold on and sort of gatekeep and say that only if you're ethnically Indian then you are a Hindu, which is also problematic because we also know that that's not true. And how is it that we balance it? Because I've because I understand that you want to say that it was the Indians that certainly maintained the tradition. Yes, because over the years and everything, that's where. But at the same time, you also can't deny that others are also Hindu as well.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, and frankly, it's not. I mean, it's totally understandable because Hindus in India's modern identity is built around this, right? There's uniqueness of their Indianness and Hinduness and Hinduism is tied to the land for sure. But like, go to Southeast Asia, like you go to Thailand, go to Cambodia, all these places. They have a place called Ayodhya. They have a river, the Mekong. You know what the Mekong is? Ma Ganga. That's the name of the Ganga taken to that region, right? So the names of the Indian
I didn't
places
know this.
the Mekong is like, so many of these places. What's the name of the temple? I mean, the airport in Thailand, Suvarnabhumi. The entire region was called Suvarnabhumi.
Yeah,
because of the gold. It was a golden region. So and by the way, this has been happening since 3rd century BCE, right? In Vietnam and the Champa Kingdom and so on and so forth, right? So like, they weren't Indian, but they were clearly Hindus. And then are Afghans Hindus? Are people in Turkmenistan, Tajikistan Hindus that were there for, like when Arjuna talks about Mahabharata, Uttarakurus, Uttaramadras, they're all way up there. They're part of the same fold. So my problem is like, we get so focused. By the way, second century BCE, one of the greatest Vaishnavas is Heliodorus. This dude who's Greek. He's freaking Greek, and he's worshiping Vishnu, and the pillar of his pillar still stands. So like, I don't think this idea of ethnicity is 100% connected. I mean, it's connected, of course, but it's not necessary to be Hindu. You don't necessarily have to be Indian to be Hindu.
Yeah.
There has to be some reverence for the land,
right?
Sure, and some connection, just because the avatars and all these other things were kind of connected to that land and the stories we have, right? But it doesn't mean like you have to be Indian to be Hindu. And I think this is where it's like, I have issues with that. But that being said, I think some of the people that are like, part of the problem is some of these people are going out and saying European Hindus, meaning like they connect their Norse mythology, their Norse traditions to being Hinduism. And I'm like, that's not Hinduism. That's like a cousin, whatever you want to call it, but like, that's not Hinduism. So it's like this national identity and religion just like merging, and that's where I'm like, no, just be one or the other. Like, like it's kind of weird.
So I have two questions. I want to bring it back to something you said earlier, which is, ultimately we're talking about like the North American Hindus in that sense. And
you can even talk about European Hindus or whatever. Yeah.
Sure. My question is, I mean, you kind of pointed to like Thailand, or I guess Southeast Asia as a whole, they carved their own sacred geography. And I want to know, in what ways can we utilize the culture in America or the geography of America to what Sanatana Dharma means to us? And so, part of what you said was, kind of talking about the European Christians that tie it to the Norse mythology. I personally, just to push back, I don't have a problem with that. I think there's a history of syncretism, of trying to one-to-one different deities.
I'm not arguing about like connecting the religions, because there are some cognates in terms of, you could see the links between Indo-European connections. Sure. But what I'm saying is the claim that Sanatana Dharma was in Europe in 3000 BC or 2000 BC, and the paganism of Europe was the same as Sanatana Dharma. That's where my issue is. It's not. You just can't do that.
Well, we'll put that aside then.
Yeah. So
part of what I always think about is looking at the Native American community here and seeing what can Sanatana Dharma express itself in America, knowing that there has been a pretty deep spiritual tradition here in the United States that's indigenous before, colonizers came. And part of that goes into like, how can Hindus contribute to that? Second is, community-wise, what can we offer to Native Americans? And then just an offshoot of a question, maybe we can touch on this later, so maybe I'll hold on to this third question. It's a little bit different, but how does that look like for you guys.
I feel
I'm
like
gonna
I've
mute.
seen
I'm gonna be listening in, but I have to mute.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm being called. Yeah.
I've seen a few of these Hindu priests and like thinkers go and like reconsecrate indigenous people's own traditions, right? Like not bringing Hinduism into it, but like giving them the tools, maybe like some practices that they can revive their own deities and worship their own deities in their own ways, right? Like part of the thing about Hindu thought is like, yes, we're syncretic, but we're also, you know, reifying. We want to support and grow those other traditions that are, you know, that are analogous and connected to us in some way, right? Like this, and even I would imagine even if Christianity is going to die, if it was going to die out or whatever it was, Hindus would support them because that would be an Ishta for someone, right? In that context, right? This is like this idea that you, whatever deity you connect to, you worship, go for it. I mean, there's no Hindu has a problem with it. I think the problem is going to be around how is it that you're going to tell everyone else to be, right? Like worship however you want to live. Like, you know, like the example is, again, I will use in history this legendary example when the Zoroastrians came into India, right? You know, the king of Gujarat said, you know, yes, you can live in your own place and practice your own religion over there. When you come into our common area, you practice what we all do, right? You know, so this idea is, yeah, you do your thing, but don't come and tell us how to do our thing. And I think that is where the big issue is. So I think in my view, like for the Hindu perspective on indigenous traditions is we like support them. We can give them the tools that we might have from our own traditions, and maybe even like some of the basis grounding philosophy that might help them revive their own traditions if they wish to do so.
Yeah, it's actually something that has been on my mind, I would say, the last 6 months or so. What needs to happen, though, is that the Hindu community really needs to kind of reach out to a lot of the indigenous communities to actually open up a dialogue, because none of that has actually happened. I know for a lot of the functions that we have here, there some of the indigenous groups are invited to give an opening prayer or something along those lines, but that actual dialogue needs to happen, because I think there is a solidarity between both groups that can certainly help to bring indigenous culture back to I think where it should be. And I think Hindus can also sort of see some of themselves in this community as well. And I just on the flip side of that, I know it would make the ethno-nationalists the very, very upset about it too, right? Because why would you want to do that, right? But I think that is something that I'm interested in. I kid you not, I would say the last 6 months or so, it's been a topic on my mind. Is that can we have these conversations? Yeah,
I think Ram Swarup, he's a philosopher. I think he wrote in one of his books that he wants India to be a hub of all these polytheistic religions. Like he wanted a temple of Apollo in India and whatnot. I read it a few months ago. It was really, really interesting. I think it's a good that we are all discussing that. Do you think there are any practicing native religions here? I went to a few Indian reservations. I don't see any. I think they're all Christianized at this point or something.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to a couple of sweat lodges myself with a few of my Native American friends. Way back in the day, it's there. I mean, it's small, and I think they've lost a good amount of their traditional practices, but they've kept some. But you know, it's the similar way I think a lot of the Greeks are also reviving their traditions, and some Norse people are trying to revive theirs. It's this, this pushback towards like, maybe this monocultural world that Christianity, Islam are trying to produce isn't the way to go, and it's not fulfilling for them. And one of the things, because I've done podcasts with people like Gnostic Formant and Myth Vision who do a lot of this kind of stuff. What's interesting to me is, when you talk about this ethno-nationalism nonsense, you have these white Americans that are of European descent saying we're European and Christian as if that was a original like tradition and whatever. No, man, like you got colonized by these Christian mind. I mean, I don't want to be mean, but the mind virus, and then became Christian, and then you gave up your pagan roots. So you're like a mix. Like Christianity was really originally a Jewish tradition. Like it was is connected to like the mark of a mysticism of of the Judaism tradition and the theism of like the little Yahweh, big Yahweh, and in esoteric writings. But it's very interesting. It's just how like when you get into the nuance of things, like these grand narratives that people are telling themselves just fall apart. And that, by the way, that applies to the Hindus too.
My last, I would say in the beginning of August, I got into it with this individual on X about because there was a video that was circulating about Hindus doing puja at a river, and and then,
I saw that.
Yeah, and then some people were saying that it's actually not a river in Canada, it's a river in India. But like one of the things that was said is that adapt or go home. Yeah. And when I saw it, I'm like really? And yeah, I was so annoyed by it because I'm like, how have like what do Hindus have to do to adapt? Because like I just think about what I went through growing up, like when you talk about like what is a Canadian lifestyle or even an American lifestyle, like we had Halloween, we have Christmas, you do everything that your society that you're living in is a part of, but in the eyes of these individuals, adapting means to just let go of your traditions. Right. Is to let go of your roots, and I think that's problematic because I mean, when you talk about the freedom of religion in America and Canada, like where do you stop with that? And it's a whole other world. It really is. And I mean, I went down the rabbit hole at the beginning of August, like just all these different groups and people saying the same thing about, they're proud of their roots and they built this country and all of these things. It's kind of like, I'm like, dude, man, if my immigrant parents didn't come to Canada, like Canada wouldn't be what it is today because these countries needed them too. I would say what I'm grappling with right now is it's always hard to kind of pin down this Canadian identity. Whereas like I do find when I talk to those that are American is that there is a bigger sense of like an American identity, because whereas like a Canadian identity is like everything that is not American. But then when you talk about, well, what is it that makes you different? Then it's all these like superficial kind of things that people bring up. And one of the questions that people ask me is like, so what is a Canadian Hindu? And it's like, I don't know.
This is the video right here that they're trying to say Canadian reverse-based severe threats.
That's it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is the point. I think it's stupid, right? At the end of the added to the stage. There we go.
That's it. Yeah.
Can see it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can see this, and it's like people are getting their butt hurt about this, and not to forget, like all they're doing is putting fruits and maybe flowers in here. When people go boating, by the way, in America, they throw food, water, whatever it is. Yeah. So it's it's a little bit of, or even in Canada, right? It's a little bit hypocritical, but yeah, I mean, to your point, I would say like, yeah. So you go ahead. I interrupted you while you were talking.
Yeah, it's so what I've been grappling with is that is what is a Canadian Hindu identity? What is an American Hindu identity? Like what is this hyphenated identities that we have? Because when you read the comments of these individuals, like it really made me sort of reflect more and try to like come to terms with like what is it that these identities encompass? Is that what is a Canadian? Is a Canadians like the what they call the settlers or whatever they want to refer to themselves, or is a Canadian a set of values that you belong to.
Yeah.
Is an American a set of values, or is an American, a descendant of those that came and founded the country? And I think this is where there's a lot of reflection that I think we have to do, because on the flip side of it is Canada certainly has a different problem with the influx of immigration that we've had within the last number of years. And I think there is a sense of that, what is the identity as a nation, and when you bring in a new set of immigrants, how is it that they assimilate? Because even if you look at yourself, like, there is some assimilation that has happened within your own life, right? And if you don't have that, then do you lose your sense of your Canadian side? This is where, like,
yeah, this is where to me, it's like, first of all, I think we have to disabuse ourselves of the notion of there is one static identity. Like all people through all times have always been in flux. A little bit on the edges, They're always changing. They're always moving around, right? Indians 2,000 years ago are not the same Indians today. We have different values and needs, or whatever it is in India, right? The nation state of India is different from historical India, right? America, it's a weird thing to say America is the same from 1600 to 2020, right? It's two different Americas. And America has always been in flux. It originally was these natives that were here that had their own various traditions and viewpoints. Someone else came in, killed, destroyed, genocided, and also integrated with them, added some elements. Everything is always a patchwork. And I think the part of the problem with nationalism on the whole is this is one idea. This is what we are the core of. No, we're not. These ideas have shifted. What value freedom meant in 1775 means very differently today to us when we have the technology that plays. Like, technology and human interaction changes the nature of what a civilization is. And I think this is where it's like, no, I mean, you could talk about top level ideas like America is very individualistic, very pro freedom at some levels, but you can't, I mean, to say more than that, I feel like, what does a person, so like, are you telling me suddenly Alaska, which came in the last state in the union, has the same genetic makeup and values as someone in Florida or someone in Washington or New York? No, we've created this sense of what it means to be American. And I think that sense always has to grow, because like, first Italian Americans weren't included, Irish weren't included, Polish weren't included. You have these people come in, now they're part of the mix. I mean, so like, but suddenly I think it happens every single time. Every generation, every group, now they're like, most of the land in California, Nevada, Texas, Arizona was all like brown people of Hispanic descent, native plus Hispanic. And then you have, people, the other Europeans come in and they all have integrated. So do they have the same culture and values? And this is where it's like the nationalism. I don't mind nationalism as much as I think white nationalism is one of the dumbest things in the world. It's like the stupidest base idea around in the world. Like, suddenly, as if all other ethnic demarcations go away and just your skin color, your pigmentation is what determines your culture. Go fuck yourself. I mean, it's stupidity, right? Sorry for anyone listening.
I would say you've encompassed everything that was on my mind, and like going down that rabbit hole. The entire thing was certainly eye-opening for me, because like, being on social media certainly is different, because like, I always have to remind myself is that, like, this is probably not real world stuff. Yeah. Right? It certainly is a microcosm of like maybe 1%, and it just gets amplified over and over and over again. And I think the one thing where it has helped me is to kind of see what exactly is out there, and how is it that if you were faced with something, how is it that you would respond to it?
Right.
Yeah.
And Sammy, Mohan, thoughts on my little rant?
I mean, I don't have anything to add on that one, man. I think you're pretty clear about it. So, Shawn, I have one question for you. Do you go back to Trinidad even now? Do you see anything different from what you saw when you were growing up?
So I haven't gone back since 2007 or 2008. I was actually, my mom and my brother and his wife just came back on the weekend.
Oh,
and
nice.
So no, since I got married, I haven't gone back. And then like with the pandemic and kids, I haven't gone back. But when I was growing up, probably every 3-4 years we would go, and we would visit with family and all of that. But I do intend probably within the next few years to go back. I want to bring my kids. My wife is Guyanese. And she hasn't been back to Guyana. My in-laws haven't been back since they left as well, and they left in the 80s. So I do want to go back. I was in Guyana in 2007. I was there, so but I think, you know, a lot has changed. There has been a lot of people that reached out to me saying that Hinduism is. One person called me and he said that they foresee in 20 years in Guyana, Hinduism is going to die out. And I said that's a pretty bold statement. And then they gave all their reasons. So I think every country has its challenges. And I don't know if I can speak to Guyana. I think Trinidad is in a little bit of a different boat, in the sense that one of the things that they were able to do in the 60s and the 70s was establish like a Hindu board, the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha. So that was one of the founding organizations, and they kind of did, like, when we talk about regional differences in India and like how Hinduism is practiced, they kind of took everything and they said, this is what we're doing. And they just amalgamated everything. And they came up with like a set of rules. They opened up mandirs that had like different franchises, and they had labels, because in order to advocate for themselves on a political level, it needed to be organized on that level as well. And that was their way forward. It wasn't something that I had realized until like maybe a few years ago, when I started looking up and I was trying to understand, like, how is it that Hindus were able to advocate for themselves? And it was because in order to present like a unified front, a lot of these things had to kind of mesh and create like a distinct form of Hinduism, like Hinduism from the Caribbean. Now what I see happening is, because of the internet, there is a lot more learning that's happening amongst the society. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens as like Hindus now reconnect with the traditions in India, because I'll be honest with you, something like Ganesh Visarjan, or the way Navratri is celebrated with Garba and all of that was not something that was present in the Caribbean at any time. Whereas now you're starting to see like more of these things happening now. So I think we're in an interesting phase.
So let me ask you this, follow up with that, because I think it's, what do you find? So you guys had your Caribbean Hindu temples, and then there's like the other Hindu temples, the Indian Hindu temples, right? Is there a difference in the way the temples actually do anything? I mean, in terms of like the pujas or how they approach that, right? Because I would imagine, given the history of the Caribbean Hindus, like, you didn't have the priests the same way you would in India. You would have a very different like relationship with, like you said, you didn't have a murti, or maybe you didn't have havans either. I don't know. So like, how did that work?
So growing up in Toronto, this is where things were different. But let me take it a step back. Havans and stuff certainly did happen, but the kind of pujas that happened in Trinidad for like people of my parents' generation were fairly simple pujas where you would, like you would sit down and then you would make your offering to the Kalash, you would pray to Mother Earth, you would do Agni Puja, and whichever deity was your Ishta Deva, you would do like the puja, so you would welcome them, you would give them an offering of clothing, you would do arti, you would offer prasad, so like that. What was something that had developed was like yagnas where there would be like the chanting of the Ramayana for 7 nights. My father's family, they did readings from the Bhagavad Puran like 3 times a day for 7 days, where like the Pandit would come and there would be pujas in the morning and then they would read from the Bhagavad, and then it would happen again in the afternoon, and then it would happen again in the evening. So that was the traditions that had happened there. When we came to Toronto in Canada, this is where what ended up happening is because there was Hindus from other countries, a lot of these mandirs started to employ priests from India. And that's where we saw like a little bit of change happen. And I know that was certainly my experience. Like the whole concept of pran pratishta, no
Right.
idea. It wasn't until growing up that we imported a murti from India, that we got in touch with various pundits, that we sat down and we learned about, oh, this is what we have to do, and like these were the things that we learned, and we did pujas over the course of 3, 4, 5 days, where like
Right.
you infuse that energy. So I think if you had asked me this 20 years ago, I would probably be able to give you a very distinct answer. But now, since so much has evolved, I would say that the current model right now is a mixing of both, is that there are pundits. I would say, though, that the traditions of the South are distinct from how Caribbean Hindus practice, because the large majority of Hindus were from UP and Bihar, and there was a smaller amount that came from South. So a Caribbean Hindu would find themselves at home at like a quote unquote North Indian style temple in North America, but would probably find themselves a little bit uncomfortable visiting a South Indian mandir where like there's a lot of elaborate pujas. Yeah.
Right. That's really fascinating. I mean, it's interesting because a part of me just wants to be like, preserve that Caribbean like tradition, and don't like necessarily merge it with the other Hindu tradition and the other Hindu versions, just because like it's not any less like vital or important, right? Like, although the Vedic tradition is important for many things, but I think when you go back to the bhakti element, like with whatever you've given, what you've been given, you do those things, that becomes its own tradition, right? Like it becomes its own like important devotional aspect to that's beautiful.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. Like that is it exactly. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, because there is a certain inferiority complex that I find amongst Hindus from the Caribbean, is because we feel that because we were so detached from India, from Bharat, the spiritual homeland, is that whatever practices we have are not good enough. So that when you now start learning about it, now the terminology that gets used is that, well, this is the correct way to do it, and it really is an interesting dynamic, because I think there is something to be said that the way that the pujas were done was how it was carried on. And one aspect that I do think that we from the Caribbean do take with us is bhakti, like that devotion, and it's something that I find lacking in Hindus growing up in North America, because bhakti isn't like this intellectual exercise, right? It's a feeling, it's devotion, it's complete surrender, and it's I just watched the Narsingh movie, and I like just that aspect of like surrender and bhakti and how you develop that relationship with Bhagwan. Like it's something that I think Hindus in the Caribbean were used to doing, because that was all they had. There certainly wasn't any complex pujas that they were used to doing. And I think when we come to now being in North America is that there is like a merging of a lot of these different things. And is it going to last the next 50 years? I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know.
And that's the thing. And this is where it's like where the struggle arises, right? Because even if you go back to the Vedic times, everyone says there's the Veda, but from the Veda, there are like 1,000 shakas, right? There's there'd be like the Madhyanas, the Taitrayas, the Krishna the Veda splits into these two. There's so many different shakas, right? Gopata, all these different shakas of the Vedas, and how they chant it, what practices they do, how they do it, and they do it differently. Well, the language or large part of what they chant is similar. How they do it is different, right? And from that you have the Puranic breakdown, the Agamic breakdowns. So for me, when I see like the Caribbean Hindus have their own version, to me that's just as valid. That's like, oh, like that inferiority complex. I mean, it's easy for me to say, like, it's like you don't have it, but it's more like you have something unique that's like worth preserving in the struggles of your existence. You built this tradition that finds that line to Paramatma, like say someone like Shrebati, or or any of these people that were away or treated horror, like in a bad place, to just reaching out to God and giving him whatever little they have, and you build your own tradition from that.
Yeah,
and that's beautiful. And then God reciprocates from that. So it's like you don't have to compete with anyone else. Just like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I would say that one thing that has happened certainly here in Toronto is that there has been a lot of learning, because when you have to bring pundits from India and you bring them to the Mandir and you employ them, like they're also learning from you about how we maintain our pujas and our rituals and all of those things. And it like every time I meet a pundit from India, that they're always interested in like seeing how the pujas are being done. And they're always trying to be like, oh, so this is what you do now. And I remember one time there was a pundit at the Mandir, and he came and he said, okay, so we're gonna do this puja, and here we thought it was going to be, I don't know, like a 30-minute puja, and then 3 hours later we're still sitting there, and we're like, oh yeah, okay. This is not something that we were used to. But it's I really wish that like Hindus were more open, because and I don't say that lightly, because I always find that as someone from the Caribbean, like myself and a lot of people that I'm close with, we're always open to going to different temples and traditions and just learning. Whereas I find that, if you are part of a regional group, sometimes you don't want to venture out of that. And it's something that, it's good to have distinct ways, but how is it that you come together and form one? That's a trouble that I see.
Yeah, this is Telugu guys over here that
it's the numbers, man. It's just the numbers. You see a lot of Telugus here, and then the gang up. It's just
don't get me started on that. But I really do think it comes down to what I call Hindutva consciousness. I think you're right, and I've seen it, and it doesn't even just go on just the Hindu community. I've had so many people who I have a lot of Guyanese or Trinidadian friends who feel like they're not even Indian. Like I think Diaspora American Indians don't even consider them to be Indian.
Oh, I think he got locked off for a sec. Hold on.
Okay, that's okay.
Go continue.
Yeah, and so basically, what I've noticed is that there's a kind of two camps of Hindus, and I think there's the ones who are just culturally Hindu. They just go to the temple every day and they pray, and they do have this sort of false confidence on what they think Hinduism is. I can name so many people that I know off the top of my head who operate like this. The same people who look at ISKCON and are like, oh, I look down on these people. They proselytize. We don't proselytize. But they have no I think there's a difference between practicing Hinduism and having true Hindutva consciousness, and that requires understanding the history of how our community developed and evolved over the centuries, millennia. And I think that, so yeah, I mean, Shawn, what I was saying is that I think there's so many people from the Caribbean here, a lot of them are in New York and Queens. They don't feel that the Indian Americans from India make them feel Indian at all. Like they don't feel like they have that even though they come to America and they're all like, oh, there's actual Indians here, oh, isn't that cool, we're Indo-Caribbean, and then they feel that like a little bit of tension there. But I was saying is that it comes down to Hindutva consciousness and knowing that there is a history, there's an evolution to how our traditions evolved over time, and the traditions, the spiritual traditions of the Caribbean are a part of that fabric, that Hindutva framework. And I think once you start to understand that, it's intuitive to understand it, and that's why I totally agree with you. Mukunda. I was gonna say it if you didn't, which is that I don't want anything to change. I like the syncretism or the sort of sacrifices, if you will, made in order to keep that community going in the Caribbean in terms of sacrificing certain rituals that they've probably known and more focusing on harmony on these different regional groups. So, and that part of that, we're aware of that, and that there is a place for everybody. And our tradition, the last thing I'll say is that it was born out of that instinct of let's push the envelope. Let's see what we can do differently. Keeping the core ideas and values the same, but expressing it differently in different geographical regions.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I didn't even know about the Caribbean Hindus until like probably my last year of college, right? I didn't know about their history, anything. And then like I took a class on basically like colonialism in India, and this is a passing comment, by the way. I just, that's why I first learned a little about them. And then when I went to law school, it was weird. So one of my close friends now, like he called me back then we're trying to room together. And I won't say his name, but it was like, it sounds it doesn't sound very Caribbean. It's like this, it sounds a Hindu name, like Indian Hindu name, Singh, right? And then like, so when I got on the phone, I'm like, what part of India are you from? He's like, I'm not from India. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I'm Guyanese. I'm like, what the, I didn't even know. I was like, what do you mean Guyanese? What? And then he told me, and then like I was like, this is weird. I've never met a person from the Caribbean Hindus. And then that's when I was like, I need to learn more about them. And I started doing a lot of reading and studying and researching. And then I met like his family and his world. And it's like, oh, the Hinduism he practices. Yeah, they're very different. Yeah. He's from the Bronx. He was from like, the part of New York. And I went to like a few of their events, and there's a lot of, the culture is also mixed with the Afro side.
Yes.
And so you have the music is a little different, and it's different beats. And I was like, oh, I went to like one of their Diwali parties. I'm like, first of all, I was like, there's a lot of drinking, and there's like for a Diwali party, but it was a mix of like Indian music with like the Afro-Caribbean beats to it, and it was kind of cool. I mean,
what do they call that? Oh, there's a name for it. The
chutney music.
Chutney music. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like, so the music certainly is. You could probably do a whole podcast on that by itself. One of the things that I think what sort of attracted me to music was like the traditional village style singing. So there is a lot of traditional folk songs that were passed on in the Caribbean, and a lot of it is devotional in nature and very simple style singing, and from that is where, as time evolved, these traditional folk songs then they started bringing in like more up tempo beats. There certainly was a mixing with the African culture there, and that's where you get this fusion of like soca and chutney, and chutney, for those that don't know, is very fast, upbeat music. And I mean, that's what I grew up with. It was that, and I think that one of the things that we need to sort of look at is that, because parents ask me this question all the time, is that how is it that you instill like a sense of being Hindu to a younger generation? And I think sometimes we want to take this intellectual approach, but I think things that we fail to look at are things like music, are things like dance, and these things that give you a sense of something that you can participate in, that you take ownership of. And it was through that like I kind of found myself, because I'm trying to think that if I had to be Hindu today and I didn't have music in my life, would I be the person who I am right now? And odds are no. But it's all of these things that as I get older now, you start looking back, you're like, yeah, man, my parents did, they did what they had to sort of like pass those traditions on. Now, what is it that I can do right now?
Yeah. By the way, Mukunda, you never watched the West Indies play cricket when you were growing up?
I didn't watch cricket, man. That wasn't my thing.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't think I've ever seen a complete cricket game until I moved to India for college when I was 22, and then I thought cricket's boring, and everyone's gonna hate me for it. But
I'll keep about you. It's okay. But you should know. Was it Shivnari Chandrapal?
Chandrapal.
Oh, yeah.
I think there were a couple of others as well. I forgot.
Yeah,
but he was pretty popular.
Yeah. So, Mohan, I know you might have to leave in a couple of minutes. Do you have any questions or comments before you got to go? You got to unmute yourself, man.
Shoot. Hey, it was nice. Thanks for having me, Mukunda. It was nice talking to you, Shawn and Sammy. I think we'll be in touch. I have so many ideas. I think one thing I've been debating about is creating some kind of content to show the Indo-Caribbean heritage and some content. I think I'm very good with GLAs, map animation. Let's work on it. We'll be in touch, and
certainly, yes.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Okay, so let's ask a couple of questions people want to check. So Stevie asks, question for Shawn and all: to what degree, if at all, do we admit to the existence of caste oppression so we can almost Eminem 8 Mile the competition? Go ahead, get ahead and control of the narrative. All right, you have thoughts, Shawn?
Do we admit to the existence of caste oppression? So I mean, I think we have to take a realistic view. I mean, and I think this is the problem in our discourse right now is that we don't want to admit some of the failures of Hindu society as well, right?
Right.
So I mean, I have spoken about caste because I mean, my first exposure to caste was in a textbook when I was doing world religions.
Right.
It wasn't something that formed part of my everyday language. So caste for me as a North American doesn't mean anything versus someone who is growing up in India where caste is written into their laws and all of that. So right. Yes, like Hindus have to admit that that caste oppression certainly was a thing. Is that a fault of the Hindu religion? I don't think so. Is it a fault of society? Certainly. But if we can't admit to that, then you're never going to move on from it. And I think we have those that want to deny any sort of.
Oh. All right. Well, hold on. Everyone,
I have an answer to this question as well, but I'm gonna let Shawn come back and finish his what he was saying. Hopefully he's realized.
There he is. He's coming back.
Okay.
There we go.
My browser keeps on shutting down on me.
What do you have? What browser?
Chrome. It's just Chrome.
Oh, Chrome.
Yeah, it says something went wrong.
Yeah, but continue. Yeah, you were saying.
Yeah. So I think there has to be a recognition that yes, caste oppression certainly existed. How we take that in a North American society is very different than how you would understand that as an Indian growing up in the nation state that is India right now. Caste in North America is being brought into our modern day terms as a means to sort of label Hindus as that everyone is using it to discriminate. And I think that's not the case. So I think first off, to control the narrative, we have to make a distinction as to how is it that we're talking about it in a North American setting. I can't speak to India because I don't live there. I haven't grown up there. Right. I know that that there is a movement to sort of get rid of caste annihilation. So I mean, there's all these different ways that they want to tackle it, but then I see that the government is they want to do a caste census again. So I mean, where are you going with that? Your guess is as good as mine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're trying to weaponize it for politics, and so they can claim, one thing, but their actions speak louder. It's just to talk about the Eminem 8 Mile, the competition. I think he's talking about a dharmic story of perhaps a lower caste overcoming oppression in a dharmic way, and that's a way of highlighting it while still promoting the values. Because Shawn's absolutely right. Does the religion? I don't think so. Right? I think I've tried to look for places where it would sanction the things that we see in Hindu societies, and you won't really find it. And you know what?
are you talking about? Sorry.
The harms of casteism and the oppression that we've seen in Hindu society.
Yeah.
Seldom, if at all. And then there are certain places we can look at, like Smritis and stuff, but very little you're going to find it at the fault of the core theology itself.
Yeah.
I would also.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would just say, and I'll wrap this up, and I want you to tackle that. I actually want to ask you that. Is what I would say is that you can actually look at the Mahabharata, and it's filled with stories of people overcoming caste oppression or caste dynamics being flipped on its head. I like the story of, one way of looking at Ekalavya, which I know there's many ways of looking at it, of him simply being denied he was a prince, is that regardless of how you want to understand it, Ekalavya does come from a tribal society, and despite the fact that he lost his thumb, still remains to be an amazing archer. And that's the story. That is the commentary of the author of that book, pointing to that and telling you that this is possible. I would look at is it the Panchakam, Adi Shankar's Panchakam. When he sees the Chandala, he says, "Move here," and you see he becomes a guru, right? And you see again dynamics being flipped on their head, challenges to our understanding, right? If you are considered an inferior being to me, well, I'm existing in your Akash. I'm standing on your bhumi. My 5 elements that make up my body are the same 5 elements that make up your body. Isn't Atma one and the same? So aren't we one and the same? How can I be inferior to you? Sort of that alluding to that message, even though not exactly. I would also look at the Butcher's Gita, the Vyada Gita. Vyada Gita is in the Mahabharata, so it is a Gita where a butcher, who would be considered Chandala or whatever, is giving gyan and knowledge and advice to a Brahmin who's coming to him to ask about dharma. What is the meaning of dharma? And I think one of the great messages to take from that Gita in the Mahabharata, so very authoritatively, says it is not the type of work that determines your character. It is the quality of your work. And so, you have messages like this throughout. So we have the rubric for the 8 Mile, for the Eminem, And so this is sort of, it wouldn't be hard to do so, especially in making a modern era film about this would be really cool. I mean, I shouted out Anil. Anil was at the Next Gen Hindu conference, giving an amazing talk. Actually, put out a little indie film. Let me find out what it's called exactly. I know it's basically it's not about casteism, but it is about sort of sexual abuse in sort of these spaces where you have a guru who's teaching music and he's taking advantage of his position, but he encodes a lot of Sanatan Hindu themes throughout it and sort of taking ownership of what's going on without letting other people speak for us. We're speaking about the harms of our community. It's our voices speaking about this, not a white man who has nefarious goals or, sort of a political opportunist trying to take advantage of our community issues. And I think we could totally do that with casteism.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, first of all, we could do an entire different podcast on this or conversation on this, because I think this it's such a looming topic in many people's minds, both internal to the Hindu fold and external. And I think a lot of people do try to whitewash it. And then other people try to hyper exaggerate it. I think the truth obviously sits somewhere in the middle. even on the examples you give the Mahabharata at some level, like the Mahabharata is even have those stories means there was some sort of indication that this was going on in their society, right? Like if it wasn't a big thing, they wouldn't even talking about it. So obviously, but this is not to say that casteism is a unique thing. It has been prevalent in almost every society in different ways. It's tribalism, really, because what we're talking about is different groups of people that are tribal in nature, meaning like you belong to a certain tribe or community group, and then you're integrating into a larger society, and then you're going to have a place in hierarchy there. You're going to move up, down, left, right, whatever it is. So there is obviously some level of that. And I think a large part of this is also connected to class, right? Like we can't, as much as many people hate Marx, he's right on some of this stuff. There's these class distinctions are very interesting and very important. That being said, there is a reason why at some level the highest quote unquote caste, as they would call it, the Brahmanas, are asked to be poor as hell. And there's maybe some more exploration to do there. So I don't know if there's any 8 Mile the competition. I think those people that talk that way, like I'm less concerned with getting a zinger off than being able to have a nuanced conversation. But there might be someone that's better for the zinger that can really like school someone. So thanks for that, Steve. If you want to follow up, let me know. There's I wanted to share this question from Twitter. Okay. So this is from Sandeep. Sandeep asks, how were traditions preserved and passed down in a semi-hostile Caribbean environment, particularly when children face bullying and pressures to distance themselves from their heritage? How does this experience compare to that of individuals born in modern day America?
That's a great question.
Yeah, the biggest thing is community. That's the only thing that comes down to it. When you have a strong community that gives you that sense of identity, when you have that, these things that happen outside are not going to influence you as much. And even growing up here in Canada, there is so many parallels. Like one of the biggest things that I see with kids right now, and the feedback that I get from parents is that my kids don't want to embrace their Hindu side of things. So then the next question is that, well, what have you done to give them a sense of community? Because that's where you're going to find the most value is do they have a sense of group identity? And I think that's the biggest thing. When you lack that sense of group identity, nothing is ever going to change that. And I think the one thing that we had in the Caribbean, and the one thing that was brought over here, was having that group identity because you stuck together. The problem that I see in 2025 is that as I mentioned earlier, is that your community has now expanded. So your community is no longer just the people that are from your same immigrant group. Is now encompasses all your friends that are Canadian born or are American born. So this is where this definition now needs to extend, is that, and I think that we have to look at what is it that Hinduism, like how does it add value to your life? And that's the value that the community will bring. But I mean, bullying and all that stuff, I mean, bullying, I think for my parents were people making fun of the fact that they were Indian. So how is that any different than what's going on right now? And I mean, even like I did a whole video on the term coolie. Like coolie for a West Indian is a derogatory term. And that is what the Africans, that is what they would refer to the Indians in the Caribbean. So I mean, all of this stuff, that's the environment that my parents grew up in. So is that any different than what we're growing up in here now? I mean, if you look on social media, like the term that they're using now, it's still there. I think as a community, you need to have that strong sense of identity that comes from a large group. And if you're not part of that, then I think, yeah, you probably will succumb to a lot of these issues.
Sammy, do you have any thoughts on the second half? How does this experience compare? I mean, I don't know. You could compare it because I not from the Caribbean community, nor have I, lived that life. But
but I think we can go off of how Shawn's described it, and we can sort of develop some kind of understanding. I just don't think what we've experienced here was nearly the degree of hostility than what I can imagine takes place back in Guyana. I think it was very different circumstances. It was overt oppression from people who had literally put them there as indentured servants to work, and that racial dynamic gets embedded, and there was certainly a history of racism here, but my parents came here as, thank God, right, as not in those circumstances. Do we have racism here? Absolutely. Does that racism I think this right now, what we're experiencing, is the worst that's probably ever been since like maybe a dot buster age. So we're going to experience together what it means to be American, dealing with a semi-hostile environment this year and the next coming years. And so that is to be seen. I think that a lack of it, but I think that through that oppression and that's just how Western societies work, is I think we find our strengths in those oppressions. I think the American narrative has allowed people to find strength in places where racism is being more broadened for Indians in general. So we'll see how the outcome goes. But yeah, that's the way I'd put it. I think for the longest time, our struggle has just been a lack of visibility in general, and so that has contributed among many issues to why there hasn't been as much of a robust Hindu community as we would like.
I think you've kind of addressed this question too with that. Right? What is the experience of a young Hindu growing up in the USA today? I think it's like you said, like it's going to get a little harder over the next maybe few months, few years. I don't know how long this white nationalism is picking up, and this anti-India, anti-Hindu kind of like sentiment is going to continue, right? Like Canada has a big one too. Like I remember I was in a space at one time, and I said, okay, what if I give up my religion, give up my cultural practices, give up being whatever it is I am, and really just become Christian, and then be like as Canadian or American as you are? Am I still allowed in this country? Like, no.
Yeah.
And you're like, at the end of the day, it's like, no, you can't say it's cultural then. You don't care about the culture. You care about my race. And I think a lot of this stuff is like coded for race. Like, like these Turning Point USA guys, all these people out there, they're running around talking about nationalism. They're all doing it for race. And it's like a weird like going backwards, because I'm sure if they all did some sort of 23andMe, I guarantee you they ain't all going to be white.
I would say that one thing that we have going for us right now is that having grown up in Canada and the US is that we have experience of like what it is to like meld two different identities. And I think more and more of people like yourselves now need to start speaking up and just sort of talking about what that experience is like. And I think that will certainly help the next generation. And I could just give you the example of like what's happening within my own family right now. So my kid's school, so my son is going into grade 2. So for junior kindergarten, senior kindergarten, and grade 1, every year, we went into the school, we spoke to the teacher, and we went in and we did Diwali celebrations with the entire class. We did Holi celebrations. Growing up, that would never be a thing. Like for my wife or myself, that would never be a thing. And it's not that you're trying to convert anyone or do anything like that, but you're just trying to share in your tradition. But for my son now, that's like normal. Like it's normal to be doing those things. Whereas when I was growing up, none of that stuff was normal. It's like there was like this brick wall that was separating my school life from my Hindu life. And I think for kids growing up, that's sort of like the next step in that evolution that we have to be working towards.
Yeah. Sammy? Anything?
I wanted to ask Shawn, I'm taking a different direction. Is that okay?
Yeah, there's one more question for Shawn, then we'll go that different direction. Is that okay?
Sure.
There's a question from Stevie here. All right, Stevie says, question for Shawn and all. Do you think a sense of Hindu masculinity is used for diaspora teenage young adults? Do you think there's a patriarchy and male chauvinism embedded in our religion?
So let me answer that second question. Do I think there's patriarchy and male chauvinism? I don't think there's patriarchy that's embedded in Hinduism. No. I think there are distinct energies. There is male energies, there's female energies. But to say there's a patriarchy, I think we have so many examples of how you need to be both. Like Shiva can be Kal Bhairav, but Shiva can also be the consort of Parvati in that sense. So that answers the second part of that. Do you think there's a sense of Hindu masculinity is useful? So I think we have not been able to articulate what is a masculine Hindu, and it's something that, while I haven't seen on YouTube, I get comments frequently on Instagram about it, because Instagram does attract more of a younger demographic. And where this has come up more recently is because I've been sharing a little bit more of my personal life on Instagram. So posting photos of my wife and marriage and like all those things. And the amount of feedback that I got back from that was a little bit astounding, and like I couldn't really understand it. And then a few people messaged me saying that there has been an emasculation of what it means to be male, like generally in our society. So like I think we've seen that. I've read a lot of like studies and stuff that has been done, and you can trace it back to what's happening in society with the rise of education in our women, which is a great thing. But then what is the role of a man? And I think this is where I think we need to be able to articulate that, because even in my own circle, there's still this question about how is it that you find the right person for yourself. And I think, when we come down to it, like biology is still a thing. Biology is very real, and we have to be able to comfortably state what is it that a Hindu masculine energy is about, what is a female feminine energy about, and how is it that we can raise individuals to encompass these necessary qualities, if that is the life that they want to live, so that they can start their own marriage life and then have kids and so forth. So yeah, I think it's helpful? Yes. Do we talk enough about it? Probably not. Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, interesting, because I'll start with the first, your second part first, which is our patriarchy, male chauvinism. So I'm going to disagree with you a little bit here. I think there is patriarchy built into Hinduism, but I don't think that's entirely problematic, because you can have systems that are matriarchal, patriarchal, and if you put it in the form of history, like most societies were patriarchal, but that doesn't mean that it is oppressive. Now we can look through the text and find demarcations of where there is some oppression here and there, and there's also some places where women are given a lot more let's put power, authority, openness, whatever it is, compared to, I would say, other ancient traditions that like in Greek, Roman, whatever it is, you'll find in that same comparable time period a lot more power to given to Hindu women. And I would say this is, we have to also, just like we deal with caste, we have to deal with the fact that a lot of the Dharma Shastras and a lot of these texts are written by men, of course. And so they're written by men, primarily for men. And we have to address what that means, right? Even though we do worship women, we worship them like as mother, goddess, as, wife, all those things. There's these elements that we do have to also think about and address. And it doesn't mean that it's all bad. The word patriarchy isn't bad. It's just a form of passing down of property, of things. Now, that being said, in the Hindu world, there is a lot of nuance and diversity. while like a majority might be patriarchal, there is a minority part or a substantial minority that's matriarchal. Certain things come through the mother's line, certain powers a mother has over her father, and so on and so forth. So, and the structures also reflect that. Now, as to chauvinism, I think chauvinism definitely in maybe modern age. I can't speak to historically in the past because I didn't live there, and I can't say. But yeah, I think there is male chauvinism, and some of that needs to be addressed. I do think in that sense, each party should be able to figure out their roles in their relationship, whether you want to take a more quote unquote traditional masculine role or more equal breakdown or whatever it is. That's for the each married couple to figure out, because you can't set one rule for all. Everyone's personalities are different. What they need, what they desire in their relationship is going to be very different. Now, do you think a sense of Hindu masculinity is used for diaspora? Yeah, I think masculinity on the whole is good for obviously men. And Professor G, who's a professor from Scott, I forget his last name now. He's at NYU. He Professor G podcast. He has a bunch of his Scott Galloway. He talks about this this like despair of young men today in masculinity, as does Jonathan Haidt. And there is a problem, and like you said, part of this stems from the fact that women are being better educated. They're taking the initiative, so men haven't been for as much. And you're also finding that the jobs that men used to be really, really open to them, whether it's going to be construction or trade schools or things of that nature, have kind of started disappearing. And given that, there's less contribution that they feel, and then there's a lot. And then at school, the way young boys are treated versus young girls, it's difficult too. So there has to be a sense of Hindu masculinity that's useful. And I don't mean here about like Andrew Tate nonsense and all that malarkey. For me, I think like the ultimate Hindu masculine figure is Sri Rama from the Valmiki Ramayana. He represents the qualities of a good man, a man that cares. And by the way, I'm just removing Uttarakhand. That's Uttarakhand away, because that part is considered a killa, which is an appendix, not proper of the Valmiki itself. Valmiki, I think, ends in Yuddhakanda, but that in those books, Rama is like anything. I mean, Rama takes consideration of everyone around him. He's silent. He weeps when he needs to weep. Like his entire portion of when Sita is kidnapped by Ravana, he's running through the forest and he's in despair. It's beautifully written, and like his emotions coming out, but he also has a strength of character. When Ravana is killed, Lakshmana says something to me. He says, "In death, all enmity ends." This is a man that shows true honor, respect, love, determination. Those qualities that are very important for men, and not to say they're not important for women, but they are much more exemplified for a man to possess. And women can have those too. And for example, wisdom is a female trait. I mean, it doesn't mean men shouldn't be wise. It's a female trait. It's considered but I think given that, I think reading these texts and seeing the characters as they're described, like Bhimasena is also a wonderfully masculine man. He's sweet, calm, and gentle. Draupadi, his mother, the way he treats women, but at the same time, he's a beast of a man when he goes to war, right? And Arjuna is similar. These characters present that, right? I think having those figures in our stories with their flaws and all, right? They do have flaws, and the text deals. Even Rama is talked about, even though it's Maryada Purushottam, he still is discussed in a way where you can question it, and there's nothing wrong with questioning Rama, because actually, many texts do that. Bahubati's Uttara Ramayana does it. Many other versions of the Ramayana talk about Rama's actions and they question him. But that's part of being a man. Is like you don't take anything for granted. You take it. You should engage and push yourself. And And look, I want to do something like this with females and have them talk about what it means to be, the Hindu femininity and how that plays out, because I think it's important too. But right now, I think the bigger problem has been the male, the young men having a loss of a sense of purpose, direction, and guidance. And I think something that hopefully some of the stuff we can do can fill. But yeah, go ahead, guys.
I'm gonna shout out Parth. He's always been chatting in the thing. If you guys don't know, Parth is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and so if we ever open up that Hindu martial arts gym for jiu-jitsu, which I think is a very safe way of defending yourself, Parth is my go-to guy for how I'm gonna get that started. But yeah. I mean, just to harmonize both of your understandings. I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I would say that ancient India, I think, again, not rightfully so in many ways, was patriarchal in the sense that men were there to protect the women, and that was a hostile environment with wild animals and tigers and boars would run around in the streets of ancient India, and there were hostile forces, and men were just physically able to protect, and so they did designated rules. I wouldn't say it's embedded. I think that was just the environment in which Sanatana Dharma sort of developed itself. So it made sense to designate these rules. But as society is moving on, as women are finding their way into the workforce through to the computer age that we live in, we're finding a sense of egalitarianism in that sense. And more than anything, and I think this is where the crux of the question comes in, that our dharma has the capability of evolving itself in this new era. We're women, and that's what's most important, in a way that I don't think other traditions are capable of doing it, because it is genuinely embedded. So in the face of modernity, there's a strong conservative pushback saying that this is not what our text says. Hinduism doesn't do that. Masculinity, super important, obviously. In the ways we do this goes back to our first conversation on the temples, which is giving places like recreational centers where, I'm going to shout out Chirag's comment too. He said it way earlier at the top, which was something like
physical fitness center and things of that nature.
And brotherhood of competition. And I look at when we try to organize ourselves, I actually look at way smaller groups than us, like Smileys. The Smileys are like a fraction of us, and yet they have basketball tournaments for men and women that go across the entire world. The very little of them, they come together and they do these things, but something like a physical activity of basketball, playing against each other, playing against other mosques or Jamaat, they have a different congregational group, whatever. But you get the idea, is that they are able to do that, fostering competition. I think it useful is out of the question. It obviously is, but how we go about fostering that masculinity, I think, is a topic in and of itself that we could talk about.
No, I think that's fantastic. I think, like you said, having these gyms, workouts, maybe we should bring back kabaddi and bring back the what's it called, the akadas, where they do wrestling.
Shawn, I think that you and some other people at your level of content creation should come out with a line of gym wear. I don't know if we can get the logistics on that, but it would be really, really cool. That's not even
I'm totally down. I'm fatter than I used to be, and so
the gym
at some point I got to get back.
It's itself, to me, is a spiritual place. I think even in our tradition, working out was a spiritual tradition. We see Hanuman. We see Hanuman in so many gyms in India. Even like the Bihari wrestlers back in the day would worship Hanuman before engaging in their physical activities. The gym, working out, physical activity is a spiritual exercise. It's a spiritual place. It's the best place for people to remind themselves what this is all about and who they are and what we're worshiping and what our traditions are about. I think the best place to do that is at the gym. So
absolutely, guys. There's so much more for us to cover, but we're like 2.5 hours in today. I think we should maybe call it, unless we're ready. We could do another part later on. This is great. We're building people are watching, they're engaging, which is fantastic, which is what we wanted. So thank you all for listening. If you guys have anything else to say And then we can sign off, and then Shawn, you're welcome back on anytime again, and we'll do. This is fun. This is good.
Yeah, no, this certainly was a lot of fun. It's a long time in the making, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm happy we could have this conversation. Yes.
Absolutely.
Sammy.
Yeah. No,
Anything
I loved it. No, I think we should do this again. This is real discourse, and again, I'll say at the next gen, I think the most important conversation was the one that I saw Shawn in. I wish that went on longer. It was a little too short for me. Stuff like that needs to be broken down throughout the day. I think that's what young people would want to listen to. So, looking forward to, hopefully we get to do this again. Hopefully this conversation keeps going, but yeah, absolutely.
Excellent, guys. So we'll log out of here. Thanks, Shawn, for your time, man. So just wait till this goes out and we'll talk for a second. Okay. 1 sec. All right. This is where I suck at this stuff.
Can I just shout out, if anyone hasn't already followed Shawn, make sure you're following his YouTube, his Instagram, also TikTok. I see TikTok's going pretty well for you now, so I love that.
Get in there. It's get in there. Yeah.
So if you do have a TikTok, shoot him a follow. Build that up as well.
Yeah. If you just search for Hindu lifestyle,
100%. Hindu lifestyle, and on Twitter, it's Shawn Binda.
Yeah.
Obviously, you guys are following us. Check it out. All right, guys, take care. And
Pushpa sugandha sumalaya samire pavana munijana yamuna tire pavana munijana yamuna tire gayati vanamali Gayati vanamali maduram Gayati vanamali